Hello, everybody. Indiana Jim reporting to you from the front-facing camera on my iPhone 10, iPhone X, whatever you want to call it. Driving here in Louisville, Kentucky. You gotta say it right if you're gonna say it. Louisville. It's not Louisville. It's not Louisville. It's Louisville. And, you know, that's how you say it. This is my first attempt at recording a video with my face on it. Big issues going on right now in the Star Wars fan community. And really, it's not Star Wars fans per se. It's just people. There are people who have a particular agenda on both sides. Now, it is not a stretch to say that most people working in Hollywood are decidedly left of center in their politics. Some farther than others. You know, not every person in Hollywood is looking to implement full-fledged socialism, Marxism, whatever you want to call it. Now, there are people who would like to do that. Just like there are people on the right who would like to impose a fascist state on people. That's not everybody. There are, far left-wing elements, there are far right-wing elements. It should also be, not be a shock when I say that the far right, alt-right elements of society see for themselves an opportunity to grab a foothold. And a lot of that stems from a lot of alarmism related to President Obama's administration. And I don't want to get bogged down in politics. Just to say that there are people on the right who are what we call conservative. And the term conservative even is getting far afield of what it should actually mean. In my mind, growing up, the word conservative always meant a conservative application of government versus a liberal application of government. It had less to do with what we on the right might consider societal norms and more to do with how the government asserts its control. And in my view, as a conservative, leaning more towards libertarian at this point, that the less government involvement in our daily lives, the less control that government has over us. Take, for instance, healthcare. I understand people recognizing that we are the wealthiest nation in the world, probably, most likely, at least I feel that way. And knowing this, why can't we take care of the poorest among us? And I understand the nobility of it. I have no problem with it. In fact, I have no problem with charity and charitable giving. But when you force charity upon people, when you try to use the government as a vehicle for charity, you generate resentment and rebellion. I mean, you try to force your kids to eat their vegetables. They want to rebel. If you're a parent, you understand your kids, they won't do stuff as readily if you try to make them do it, as opposed to if they want to do it willingly. So let's use the analogy of government as a parent, as some sort of, now there's a lot of glare on here and I apologize for, right there. Whew. I don't know how to. I have to develop some kind of shield or something for that. Anyway, I hope that doesn't bother too many people too much. I'm driving off the road. So using the analogy of parenting, if the government is in fact a parent, for example, forcing the successful among us to give more of what belongs to them, that's usually what we call theft. But we also understand socially that there is a tax burden because we fund the services that our government provides. Okay? I don't know, I'm getting off into the weeds here, and I don't want to get off in the weeds. We're talking about fandom and everything else. I guess what I'm trying to say is there are people on the left and people on the right who love Star Wars, who love Star Trek, who love Marvel Comics. And there is an element of people who love diversity for diversity's sake, like me. I love for people to see themselves represented in the media they consume, in the stories that they read, in the stories that they watch, and that they hear, and the music that they listen to. Because that's how we form communal bonds. And I don't believe that we should arbitrarily, and this is where people who sound misogynistic get off in the weeds here. So let's take, for instance, Rebel Force Radio. Jimmy Mack and Jason Swank are getting a lot of grief for the way they are comporting themselves in their rhetoric. And a lot of it for very good reason. Because they are not taking care to understand the emotional impact that their words have on people. Now, if you go to twitter.com/IndianaJim, I have one Twitter moment on there cataloging basically how Rebel Force Radio got to where they are, how they are perceived, and recent Twitter activity, how bad it looks, how bad it makes them look, and the way they are almost a psychological angle as to why they're saying what they're saying. Having been a longtime listener and observer of them, they've really experienced a sea change in how they comport themselves. So what happens is there is an element in our society of people who, in order to achieve justice, now we're talking, social justice. What does that mean? That means a just opportunity for all walks of life. Okay? Without getting into the weeds here, to make sure we are furthering the dream of Dr. King, that people will be judged by the content of their character. And so when you have things like, let's take affirmative action, the goal of affirmative action is admirable, to give more people of color opportunities to succeed, when in reality everyone in this country does have the same opportunity on paper. However, there are places, there are times when perception is perhaps askew because of how someone is brought up, their political leanings, their upbringing, the things that they hear from parents and mentors and everything else, the messages they get from media, that tend to make things more difficult for minorities in our society. That's legitimate. However, the key really to any kind of substantive change is changing people's hearts, not just changing the laws. Abraham Lincoln made the Emancipation Proclamation, but that didn't instantly make African Americans equal in the eyes of a majority of maybe a more majority of Americans. I don't know. I wasn't alive back then. I don't know whether it was a majority or not. But it took many, many decades. I mean, from the Civil War, what was it, the 1870s, 1865, I think is when it started. From the 1870s, 1880s to the 1960s. It took it like 80 years to pass the Civil Rights Act, which, by the way, was resisted by a predominantly large amount of Democrats. And not to get political, because I don't care for the GOP or the Democrat Party. Neither one of them. Because I'm with George Washington on this. When he said to eschew political parties, stay out of political parties, because it becomes team sports. Yeah, my team wins, your team loses, and that's where, well, anyway, whatever. Not the point. The point is, when somebody like Jason and Jimmy see, okay, this is arbitrary. This, let's say this woman was hired for this position when on paper she's not as qualified as the man, and so she was hired because she's a woman. That kind of thing, that's not achieving social justice. That's achieving a statistical balance. If you hire the less qualified person over the more qualified person, let's say you hire a man who's less qualified than the woman, that's unjust. That's unjust. Injustice, unjust. That's unjust. Surely people can agree with that. And if you think that the less qualified man should be hired over the more qualified woman, that's probably what we call misogynism. So let's say that one of the biggest things that came up was this idea that Dr. Aphra, the female character in the Darth Vader comic series, got her own spin-off series. She was far and away one of the runaway best side characters in the Vader series. She was extremely popular with fans, and so that's why they gave her her own series, because fans loved her and thought, hey, we want to see more of her, let's see more of this character. Had nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. She was just entertaining as heck. It was just a great character, a funny character, just hilarious. And so they gave her own spin-off series. Now, Rebel Force Radio, these guys are not immersed in the expanded materials. They are not addicted to reading the comics and the novels and everything else. So they come on their show and are talking about, why did Dr. Aphra get a series? She's just getting a series because it's a female character. And there's this agenda to blah, 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 blah. Totally missing the point that she was a popular character. From a marketing standpoint, a publishing standpoint, makes every bit of sense in the world to do a comic based on Dr. Aphra because of her popularity. Now, does that mean that every time there's a female-centric character that it's on the merits? No, but that's not yours to decide. That's not ours to decide. You have a female character. Let's check it out, see how good it is. If it's a great story and it works, no problem. It doesn't matter what your agenda is. Because what have you done? You've succeeded in telling a good story. That's your job. Tell a good story. If you tell a crappy story, and honestly, it doesn't even matter if it's male or female. If it's a good story, it's a good story, period. End of discussion. Gender doesn't come into it. Sexual orientation doesn't come into it. Skin color doesn't come into it if it's a good story. And one of the other things they said is talked about this movement to get rid of all men, get rid of male characters, let's have all female. Nobody's trying to do that. Now, there are an element of society that would want to do that. There are women who hate men, who want to see all women. Maybe, I guess, it's a handful, this big. Definitely not a majority of Hollywood. I don't think Kathy Kennedy is, pursuing an agenda to get rid of male directors, get rid of male actors. Nobody's doing this. So when you talk about a real subset of society, a real subset of politics that does exist, and then you ascribe that motive to publishing Dr. Aphra, that's where you're wrong. That's where they are wrong. Because you can't justify it. You have no evidence. You have no evidence to justify it. You have no evidence to back it up. You have no proof of anything. You have a theory. And then you immediately ascribe that theory to this thing. That's the only reason we have this, is because of this political agenda. That's wrong. And so, I only use this as a launching point to point out that there are people in our society who have been emboldened by the election of Donald Trump, who refused to distance himself from David Duke, former Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, from all these alt-right elements, because he wanted to be elected. He didn't have the decency to separate himself from the most extreme parts of the right because he wanted to get elected. Those elements are what saw him elected. Middle-of-the-road Republicans, a lot of them voted for him because the other side had Hillary Clinton. If they had run a centrist Democrat who was not a Clinton, Donald Trump would have no hope of winning. But they didn't have anybody that appealed to the center. You had the far left Hillary, the far right Donald. And everybody who's stuck in the middle is like, well, I don't want to vote that side, I better go this way. Or there are people like me who voted Constitution Party, or people who voted Libertarian, or people who voted Green, or whatever, so as not to vote for the other extreme. Or people that voted Bernie because they didn't want to vote for Hillary because she's so corrupt. Because the Clintons are corrupt. But Donald Trump is just as corrupt. So, that's where I'm in. I'm in the middle. So I don't care what side you're on. I'll get people yelling at me from both sides. It's fine. I don't care. So, what happens is you have this element of people who, people like Kathy Kennedy, Ryan Johnson, J.J. Abrams, these people at Lucasfilm and Disney have a desire to promote more female characters. That's a good thing. It really is a good thing. It doesn't mean that your male characters are less valuable. It means that there are female fans who want to be represented. It doesn't matter what your demographics are. Because, honestly, there's more women than there are men, just on a pure population standpoint. So, if you want to talk about just statistical demographics, let's just make it mathematical equations. We're way behind. And that's the point. That's the point. Now, is it a social justice thing to say on balance we need an equal number of female or male characters? I don't think so. Because here's the other side of it. Kathy Kennedy hires a male director, they got rid of Trevorrow. Okay, well, we bring back Abrams. Well, Kathy had this opportunity. She could have hired a female director. And the fact that she didn't hire a female director somehow means that she's betraying someone's cause. JJ taking over, he's the executive producer. That's a no-brainer. And Kathy Kennedy is not denying someone else an opportunity by going with the safe bet. Could she have extended an opportunity? Yes, but this isn't a negative. It's a negative for some. I greatly desire to see more female artists in Star Wars. But I'm not going to get mad just because JJ was brought in to direct a film. Or that Ryan Johnson was given 3 movies. Ryan Johnson made a great film. He deserves an opportunity to make more. The Game of Thrones guys. Now, there's questions about their character. I don't want to get in the weeds there because I don't know anything about them. But they're producing a good show. Dave Filoni. It's Star Wars Lucasfilm Animation. There's no reason to dump Dave just to hire a woman just so you can say you hired a woman. That would be arbitrary and that would not be just. Extending opportunities to other women and people of color, awesome. Ryan's cinematographer, I can't remember his name, but he's, I suppose, African American. He is a person of color. Or no, Solo. I'm sorry, Ron Howard's cinematographer in Solo. Is a person of color. who did a phenomenal job. That guy deserves more work because he's great at his job. He doesn't deserve more work because he's a person of color. I would love to see more people of color get work, but there's a distinction there. There is a balance there. And I'm not going to say, oh, they only hired a person of color because they want black people in there. No, because that would be unjust. That's not the point. That man obviously is good at his job and shot a beautiful movie. Period. Doesn't matter whether he's black, doesn't matter whether he's white. And see, that's where more conservatives get lost in the weeds again, is because, it shouldn't matter if he's black or white, just hire the best person. No, but it does matter. It doesn't matter to you because you're white. It matters to an African American because, oh my gosh, that's a guy just like me, who came from a similar circumstance as I did, who is making it, who is getting an opportunity because he's good at his job. That's where it's at. That's what it is. Put yourself in the shoes of another person. Well, another thing, Steve Glosson, host of Geek Out Loud, was a guest on Rebel Force Radio, and much has been made of some quotes from him, where, he said something about, I can't remember what he said, about, if you're a 12-year-old girl in a wheelchair, you don't feel like you don't need to see someone like you in a wheelchair. You want to aspire to something better, something greater, something. And he devolves into this idea, not thinking he's really just devalued a handicapped child or whatever, special needs child or whatever you want to say, their sense of identity, because they're stuck in that wheelchair. Why shouldn't they have more heroes like them who are also in a wheelchair, who are overcoming those circumstances, who are strong in the midst of those circumstances? Now, I say this as a 4-time presidential election Republican voter. I didn't vote for Obama either time. I didn't vote for Kerry. Sure as heck didn't vote for Al Gore. And I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. So we don't have to fall on one side or the other. There are real legitimate issues here, and Mr. Glosson, he came to the defense of those guys who have been his friends all this time. But the problem is they're not aware of how their words sound. And the problem with the criticism is a lot of it is not in good faith. A lot of it is angry, a lot of it is over emotional, a lot of it is purely political. But that becomes the problem. The minute we have someone criticizing us, we automatically assume it's political. We automatically assume it's arbitrary. We automatically assume that person is not arguing in good faith. We automatically assume that they have something against us, not based in fact. Because for some reason we lack the ability to look at ourselves, to self-examine and see where the problems are. And that's a real issue. That's part of being an adult. That's part of being a responsible person, is being able to see where you're wrong and make adjustments and make changes and admit, you know what? That was really wrong of me. That really didn't sound good. I know what I meant, but you didn't know what I meant. So let me be more clear. But once you're more clear, you have to take steps to be different, to speak differently, so that doesn't happen again. They made some blanket apology and deleted some part of one of their episodes that sounded bad, made an apology, and then kept doing the same crap. That's the biggest problem. So, this has been Indiana Jim. We've gone 24 minutes. I've had my rants. Anyway, drop a like if you like. Drop a dislike if you don't. I don't care. Leave a comment. Let's have an actual discussion. If you want to have a discussion with me in good faith, leave a comment right down there. If you like what I'm saying, hit the subscribe button over there. Subscribe over there. Click the bell. Get the notifications. That's it. So I want to say thank you to all of you for watching and listening and being there. And I hope I didn't say anything too offensive, but if I did, let me know, because I want to know how it sounds to you. If there's any place that I can do better, let me know. I feel like we could really have some good productive discussions. Communication is where Look, communication is where we solve problems. It's where we improve society. It's where we improve fandom. If we can all do that, but not all of us want to argue in good faith. Not all of us want to debate in good faith. Not all of us want to have a different opinion and then come together as friends. I want to. I like having more friends of differing opinions. And it helps us be better people. It helps us be more gentlemanly and respectful when we can disagree without hurting someone's feelings. Because you're not going to change anybody's mind by being a jerk. You're not. So, anyway. Thank you very much. If you're a jerk in my comments, I'm not talking to you. Period. So, anyway. See you all later.